LinkedIn series, Why Are You an Entrepreneur? Talking about the trials and triumphs of the journey. Now, for those of you who don't necessarily know what 8 Simple Steps does, we actually eliminate all the overwhelm, all the confusion, all the complexity of building, managing, scaling a business. And we do it in 8 simple steps. And it's perfect for new entrepreneurs, but also those who are struggling a little bit. I also want to let you know why this series even started. Having worked with hundreds of entrepreneurs, I discovered that there were certain gaps that kept coming up over and over, certain mistakes that were being made that could be avoided, and some mindset issues that really can derail the entire process. So I have compiled some of the best, most successful words of wisdom that are going to come your way from industry experts across numerous areas. And they're all entrepreneurs who are going to share not only their story, but some wisdom of how to be successful in one of the hardest things you can ever do. And so I'm very excited to introduce you to tonight's guest, Yvonne Marches. Did I pronounce that right?
It's a doozy. It's Marchese. It looks like
Marches.
Marchese. Some people call me cheese.
I won't call you cheese. Too pretty to be called cheese. So welcome so much to, why do you want to be an entrepreneur? Why are you an entrepreneur? So I'd like you to take a minute and introduce yourself.
Hello, and thank you so much for having me. This is I feel really honored to be here. Again, my name is Yvonne Marches. I'm the host of the Late Bloomer Living podcast. I'm also a professional photographer. I specialize in family photography, headshots, and branding photography. Do a lot of work for small business owners to help tell their story, who they are behind the brand, and help them put together images for their websites and their social media. So that is what I've been doing for 11, 12 years, hard to count anymore. Love it. I came to it late. I started photography when I was 40 after having been wondering what I was going to be when I grew up for a long time. And then about the time was turning 50, I had a midlife awakening, I will say, and started feeling really good where I hadn't been before. Had a lot of confusion and focus issues and a little bit of loneliness, things like that. I did some work on myself, started feeling better, started feeling hopeful and energetic, and then started wondering what the next 20 to 30 years was going to look like, what it could look like. And I got excited about that. And I got this idea for this podcast. And then it took me 2 years to actually make that happen. But I launched it in 2020 and have never looked back. I mean, it's been a phenomenal experience to do that.
So I want to take a step back and say, one, congratulations on all of this, because you did venture into something hard and you're definitely working it every day. But did you come from corporate America and leave a corporate job to maybe take a side hustle and take it up a few notches and do it full time?
No, I from the time that I was about 6 or 7 years old, I wanted to be an actress, and I pursued that. That's what brought me from. I grew up in Texas, but always knew I wanted to move to New York City. Moved there in my 20s. I was a working actress for about 10 years, which also means that I was unemployed or working survival jobs for
You
the
were an
rest.
entrepreneur, you just didn't know it.
It's true.
Right?
They're very closely related. I had no idea. But yeah, I just cobbled together the survival jobs. So I had a resume that was not with any deep industry experience. I worked as, an executive assistant to the CEO of a hedge fund for a while, a host of other things. But by the time I got to my 40s, I felt unemployable. And that is one of the reasons that I picked up a camera and decided to start a side hustle for that. I was laid off in 2008 I had just gone back to work. I had small children at the time. gone back to work doing a job that was, again, a survival job. And that is what sent me home and had me thinking, what am I going to be when I grow up? My husband said, sleep on it and you're going to be fine. And I woke up in the morning and said, photography. That's what I want to do. And he supported me, bought my first big camera, did a study from home program, and carried that camera everywhere in my big purse for a few years and started doing little sessions and building it up, and it saved me.
So well, first off, I never even knew about the actress part. So I'm super intrigued with that right now, but I don't want to go in a total different direction and be a squirrel here and go, oh, I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk, have I seen you on a series? Have you been on commercials? Is it Broadway?
All right. All theater productions. So no, not a lot of film or television or anything like that.
So the things that you just mentioned, though, I would say, I think I was telling you before we even went live that the majority of clients I personally work with are over 50. They are women. They are people who have either decided to take control of their destiny, like yourself, and pursue a passion or take a talent that they have and leave a big job and embrace entrepreneurship. And then others, I have 50, 55, 60 who have been displaced in the market due to ageism, which is such a reality, that they've kind of been forced into entrepreneurship and they're kicking and screaming a little bit. And so I want to say, if anybody's out there thinking like that, I want you to take a step back and hear what we're going to talk about, that there is a second act in life and that things do happen, like getting displaced, like yourself, and then maybe having to have deep reflection and say, okay, what are my next steps? And entrepreneurship works for a lot of people, not everybody, but it did work for you. And I want to ask you, I'm going to ask something personal. You don't have to answer it, but do you think you kind of went through a little midlife crises at that 50 mark where you're like, okay,
I think my entire 40s were a bit of a crisis, actually.
Really?
I had children late. I had my first child at 35, and leaving the theater, I was ready to walk away from doing theater, but I didn't have anything to replace it with, and it had been an all-consuming passion for me, and I had a huge amount of drive around that. So to suddenly find myself not doing that, and by choice, I wanted to be home with my kids. It left me with an identity crisis. And then throughout my 40s, I was telling myself a story of, I just kept telling myself things like, oh, I'm getting old. I'm getting old. I'm getting old. And it started to show up in my health with little health issues all over the place. It showed up in my attitude at the job I was at. It showed up everywhere. And I felt powerless, and it was an awful feeling for almost my whole decade of my 40s. I don't really call it a crisis so much. I don't know that I believe in midlife crises, because I think what it is it's a time for people to go deep and rediscover what they really want, because I think that by the time you get to midlife, you're really good at some things, and you've also pushed aside some of your dreams from when you were younger, and it's kind of balancing what you've always wanted with who you've become and trying to figure out where you go from here and what's next. And that's why I started the podcast, is because I did start to feel so hopeful and so curious about what might be next, because I don't want to ever retire, but I don't see myself doing photography in my 70s. So what could I do? What might I do? And in starting the podcast, I realized that the one thread that goes from theater to photography to podcasting is storytelling.
Yeah, you're right.
And that is my true passion. So what I'm doing on the podcast now is interviewing people who have hit the wall in midlife and pivoted or reinvented themselves or figured out what was next. and are continuing to do that because it's not a one and done.
So, do you have two businesses going on simultaneously?
I do.
It is. Okay. So now you've added a whole other level of complexity here that I could just jump off of. All right. So I'm going to say there's a two totally different audiences, right?
Yes.
So you're working one company, taking your time in photography, looking for clients. The nice thing is branding is a huge industry, huge opportunity. People need professional pictures on websites. They need professional pictures themselves. So how do you manage then working a different target audience who are on different platforms? You're running a business that's not digital, it's not e-commerce, it's outside, having to find clients, having to find people, on top of a podcast where I'm gonna ask you, who is that target audience and how do you want to work with them, or do you want to monetize this podcast? Like, what's your goal with that business?
So the podcast up to now has been a passion project. I don't have any monetization going on right now, other than an affiliate partnership with a speaking coach that I highly believe in. Other than that, I've not done it. I've had some donations through Buy Me a Coffee from patrons, if you will,
Yeah.
kind souls who love and believe in me and like what I'm doing. So that is the extent of my monetization around the podcast so far. My photography business is the sponsor of my podcast. So, I talk about the fact that I do photography on the podcast a lot because it's part of my life, and it's part of who I am. It's part of what I do. I don't necessarily have built-in commercials for my photography business, but I do talk about it a lot. And the funny thing is I have never been so busy with photography as I am right now, and I'm doing little to no marketing.
All right. So tell me then, for those people out there who have a company, they can totally relate to this, but marketing is so critical. What are these tips you're going to give as to your business is really booming? How are you getting the clients?
It's a lot of repeat clients and referrals, is what's happening. So I'm very, very fortunate and happy about that. And it's interesting. Having a podcast is a terrific branding opportunity. You're in people's ears. It's that know, like, and trust factor. They're going to either know that they like me or they don't. And what's happened through doing the podcast is I have extended my community, relationships. It has my whole life has blown up with doing the podcast and the people that I've met. And I don't know why it doesn't directly correlate with the people who are calling me to do photography, but it is all tied in. I've tied my social media, my Instagram. For instance, if you go to Late Bloomer Living, which is my handle on Instagram, it says sponsored by Yvonne Marches Photography with the link back to my photography. So that is the one official link that I have between the two businesses. And that is all they have in common.
So I always say to people, you don't have to market like crazy. Marketing, marketing, marketing. What you've done is very smart. You've taken one thing, you've really focused in on it, which is your podcast, and you're actually using that as your marketing vehicle, like just one thing to tie the businesses together, even though most people would say they're not relatable. Maybe they don't have to be relatable.
Yeah.
Maybe you just brand reach is what you're getting.
And I did a lot of the work for my photography business before I started the podcast. So I have a website that I put a lot of thought into as far as the type of work that I show. It shows the type of work that I want to do as a photographer. So that is in place. I have a pretty good history of postings on Instagram that are there. People can see the style of my work, but I am not posting every session I do. I post occasional behind the scenes things these days, an occasional headshot. But it all is there, and it's just that I don't have the bandwidth to do both
Hmm.
right now. And
Right.
I'm very focused on building the audience for the podcast and learning what I need to do, and more importantly, what I want to do, trying to figure out what I want to offer, where I feel like I really can add value for people. That's why I don't have an offer yet. One of the first things I thought I would do when I started this was have a membership community, and I still
Hmm.
plan to do that. And that actually is my next step. But again, it was a bandwidth issue. I'm a sole proprietor. It's just me. I do all my own editing. I do everything, and I don't have a virtual assistant. So I definitely have bandwidth problems, let's say, or challenges that
Okay.
are at play.
Okay. So you've brought up another thing. This is about talking about challenges in real life. I mean, you were talking about most likely, I'm gonna jump here. It's hard to afford those outside resources right now. So you figure I'm gonna take them on myself and hopefully be as strategic as possible, like you're using your podcast. Don't get overwhelmed and be on every social media platform trying to post every single moment, because you do have clients you're going to have to take care of, right? So, as solo entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, we have a lot of moving parts that we have to take control over. So, I'd like to know what has been the greatest challenge that you have had then as a solopreneur, having to manage all of this. What is the greatest challenge that you have found with the entire process, and how do you think you're going to overcome this? Because you are only going to grow. What's the plan here?
Well, yeah, what is the plan?
I want to know the plan. I think everybody wants, all right, what's the plan for the podcast? Are you monetizing it? Are you going to get affiliates? Are, subscribers? Like you're thinking like that,
Yes,
but you can only do so much. Like you
right.
can't be pulled in every direction. So is that your biggest challenge? You're taking on too much?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That is my biggest challenge. Um, I have, I have a son who's heading into college. So there's that. I have two kiddos. So money is an issue, being able to invest. But, what I have done is so to monetize around the podcast, let's start with that. The first thing that I have gotten excited about, the truly excited, and thought, "Ah, I could do that and I could really add value to people's lives, is by doing a summit. Through doing the podcast, I've met amazing guests who have come into my world, and I've gotten to know them and develop deeper relationships with them beyond that interview. Part of that is also having been active in Clubhouse, as you
Mm-hmm.
know.
That's where we met.
That's where we
Yes.
met, and found a group of entrepreneurial podcasters that we mind meld in Clubhouse every morning. So there's also a very strong community of midlife women explorers, I'll call it, in Clubhouse. So there's that community as well. And one of the reasons I even got into Clubhouse to begin with was just to start, I wanted to be able to hear what people's actual challenges were. I have my own ideas of what midlife challenges are, and bring people on according to what I think. But being in Clubhouse gives me an opportunity to really hear what people are struggling with. So I
Yes.
went in as market research, was my original idea for that. When Clubhouse was expanding crazy like, it also meant that I was growing my audience quite a bit. I was definitely seeing an uptick in downloads. And for this first year and a half, audience growth has been my first priority, is just to see how good of a show can I produce, and can I grow my audience. And so Clubhouse was really doing that in the beginning. Not so much now, because now I've settled into the communities that I'm in, and I'm not stepping out because there's, again, bandwidth issues. But what I've done is develop deeper connections within that platform. And So in doing so, I now have this amazing connection to other women who are entrepreneurs in midlife, who are speakers, who are coaches, who have all different kinds of expertise across different disciplines. And I can bring all of them together in one place to serve the person that may be in the spot where I was 4 or 5 years ago, where I was confused. I didn't know what I wanted. All that, all those pain points that I was feeling back then. I feel like everybody, the name of the podcast is Late Bloomer Living. I feel like everybody has a little bit of a late bloomer in them in some area of their life. So you may be a rock star at your career, you may be a rock star mom, but there's going to be something that's been a sticking point for you, and you are now telling yourself a story that it's too late. And so the summit is all about being a launching pad to say, no, let's get you past that. Let's get you past the stinking thinking, reframe it. Day one is all about getting aware. Day two is all about reframing the thinking and being compassionate with yourself about it, because it's a lot of years of ruts in the brain being well worn. And then day three is all about action and courage. And so I've got all these people I can bring together to do this. And so it's going to be a free online summit, but it's 33 speakers. Not everybody can watch everything.
My goodness, but so great. And what's the date that it
May
starts?
11th to May 13th. And it's called Midlife Uprising.
Oh my God. And it's such a great name. Great
Thank
name.
you. Thank you.
So a couple of things that I like about what you've said is, you went and looked at other marketing opportunities to get your reach out there, to, elevate your authority. Okay. This summit does that. It elevates other people's authority, but you identified something that maybe needed to be done to expand and the brand reach, the elevation, letting people know exactly who you are and what this is all about. And a summit could be a great opportunity for people out there as entrepreneurs to go ahead and do the same. And then you mentioned Clubhouse. Would you recommend a certain type of entrepreneur go on Clubhouse?
It's a great question. I think there's room for everybody on Clubhouse.
Okay.
It has been, without hyperbole, it has been nothing short of life changing for me to
Wow.
meet all of you in Clubhouse. I host rooms now with a couple of ladies, one that I met in Clubhouse who ended up coming on my podcast, and two other ladies who host a podcast that's also about pro-aging. It's called Twisting the Plot. We do a Wednesday room, and we have these deep conversations about how can we rethink aging? How can we reimagine it? And every time I come out of that room, I have juice to go on. It's fuel for the fire,
So people can start a podcast, people can look at doing a summit, and people can expand to social media to more of an audio platform. Those are three things that what I'm loving here is that as a business person, you've identified marketing opportunities, branding opportunities that some people may not have thought about, because people sometimes think it's a heavy lift to do a podcast. Some people, yeah, it is.
It is, yeah.
But look at what you're doing with it to build the photography brand with it, not just even necessarily the podcast. They're really piggybacking off each other and working synergistically, and I think that's great. I think sometimes you got to take a step back to really look at the big picture here. So for entrepreneurs out there, a summit, you can gather some of the people with like-minded interests and values and content and be able to make a difference out there. You're making an impact. And so that's my big question is this impact seems to be the mission and the passion from the aha moment.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's how businesses start. It's an aha moment.
Yes. And I will say that I do get a little impatient sometimes, but for the most part, the slow growth that I'm experiencing as an entrepreneur, because I've never thought of myself as an entrepreneur before. I think of myself as a creative. I'm a storyteller. I'm a performer too. I was never a public speaker, though, I will say. And in doing the podcast, I thought, well, what else can I do to expand my reach? And I started to think I probably need to start doing speaking engagements. I need to go on other podcasts and speak out that way as well. But I'll tell you something, even as a performer, I was terrified, and I can't overemphasize it, of public speaking on my own from my heart for what I had to say. And
That's
that is
surprising, I have to say, with your background. That's totally surprising.
right. And I understand that. But the difference is that with the theater production, I have a script, I have costumes, I have a rehearsal process, and a whole team of people. And it all comes together, and you're there to tell a story, and I'm a part of that. And to speak from my heart was always very vulnerable. Very, I had a hard time keeping the thread of what I wanted to say. And I would very often break down crying in embarrassment and frustration with not being able to get my point across. So I will say that what I ended up doing was taking a speaking course with a woman named Johanna Walker, and ended up writing a signature talk through that program. And that is my one affiliate partnership that I promote through the podcast, because I believe in it. And if I'm going to do any kind of affiliate marketing through the podcast, I want it to be something like that, where it has been a game changer for me. So in taking her course, in participating in Clubhouse, I now find myself able to clearly speak and speak and speak and speak. It's like
But
working a muscle.
so for other entrepreneurs who are walking the same journey as you and probably can relate to this story, wondering where to go next, having to juggle everything, not having the bandwidth, being limited with funds to bring a team in to get the lift taken off of you, what would you say to them right now to overcome how they may be feeling?
It really is all about taking baby steps. It's about breaking it down, breaking the big tasks down into the smaller tasks, and being patient with not being able to go as quickly as you want it to go. I have time. If I and really, it's a little bit of mental judo in that it's not about my destiny. This is so classic and cliche, but it's not about the destination. It really is about who I'm becoming doing what I'm doing. And when I can tap back into that, and it's what's possible for you as well. Like, who can you become because of the work that I'm doing?
Right. Are you happy with what you're doing as an entrepreneur? Are you happy with the decision you made?
Very, extremely.
So, any other words of wisdom for people out there, especially those who may be starting something in their 50s or 60s or 70s? Because the challenge and the experience is different at that age for the better. And more people are starting businesses at that age, and more women. So they're jumping into it. And I want them to really understand that you have unique gifts that the younger entrepreneurs do not have. So for
Yes.
those at 55 or 60 who are reinventing themselves and trying to figure this out, what would you say to them?
I would say, I'm going to tell you something. I think that the key to the fountain of youth is to put yourself in the position of being a beginner. That if you think back to when you were younger and you were doing new things all the time, as a young person, everything's new. And that when you're doing something that you're interested in, first it's like identify look for the things that you're good at that other people ask you to do, to figure out what you can do that provides value for people, that whatever, your superpower, and then step into it with some humility and some humor as a beginner, and see where that takes you, like those butterflies in your stomach. it will make you, it will give you energy. You may not sleep as much at night because your brain is going to be going, ooh, what? Ooh, maybe next. Ooh, ooh, ooh. There's this excitement that started to happen for me when I started down this path, and that has not gone away. There's ebbs and flows to it, certainly. You get into the day to day on things, and it definitely can be challenging. There's always a slog, right? But when I can tap back into why I'm doing what I'm doing, and remember that I get to do it. It's not that I have to. I get to.
That can make a big difference too, because some people, they have to do this in order to support a family. But I think that what you've given them is really good mindset advice here, and having the mindset of looking at this as a process, and keep going with it. Keep embracing it. I mean, embrace the entire experience, and I think conquer your fears with it, because fear is what can bring a lot of people down in entrepreneurship, and I am not getting any fear out of you. And if you do
Oh,
have it,
tons of fear.
yeah,
Tons of
you may be
fear.
hiding it. I mean, we all have it, but you're
You can't
overcoming
have
it
courage
really
without
well.
fear. You can't have courage without fear. It's
Yeah,
there. But it's also, anxiety and fear and excitement. They're two sides of the same coin. It's tapping into its mindset. It really is.
yeah,
And I am having to constantly, I mean, that's what entrepreneurship is, right? It's like a crash course in learning about yourself and growth. So, personal growth. You want to grow personally, become an entrepreneur, because all of a
right.
sudden you're doing all the things and you're
Personally,
coming again.
professionally, every skill set, everything.
Absolutely, absolutely. But if you're doing what you love, if you're doing what you like and what you're fascinated by, then what a fun ride, you know? It's like scary.
But rejuvenating in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
I have loved this conversation. In fact, I like have a million more questions, so I'm hoping you're going to come back. But
I'd be
um,
happy to.
I do want people to know how to get a hold of you, how to listen to your podcast, how to get a ticket to the summit. Can you share how they can reach out to you?
Sure, absolutely. It's latebloomerliving.com is the website, and Late Bloomer Living is the name of the podcast. So on any podcast platform, that's what you look for. There's going to be a little person behind a wall looking up like this. Look
Is
for
that the
that.
picture?
Yes. With a flower growing out of her head. So look for that. And for the summit, again, just save the date. It's May 11th to May 13th. I'm still working on the pages that are going to be there for registering for that. But I'm on Instagram as latebloomerliving.com as well, or Late Bloomer Living. At Late Bloomer Living. So you can send me a message if you want to, or just follow me on Instagram, and I promise you I will be talking about it.
It's wonderful. And I'm very excited that your photography business is blooming, not just booming, but blooming. It kind of
Right.
all works together. And I'm really happy to hear the creativity you've had to use some crossover techniques in marketing to get yourself out there. And I think you've given some great ways for people to kind of take a look at summits, podcasting, and Clubhouse. Those are three big ones, and I'm glad they're really working out for you. And I see huge things with your podcast. I think maybe you'll be monetizing that with advertisers, maybe. So I'm just saying, but thank you so
Working
much.
on it. Thank you
Thank you
so
so much.
much.
And for those of you out there, we will have another entrepreneur next week to give you some words of wisdom uh, gathered from their journey. You can see how a journey will take you in so many different directions, and how you can overcome those challenges. You can have such success and triumphs, and sometimes you got to take it in baby steps. And so we'll be back at 5 o'clock next Thursday, and another rock star entrepreneur. If you have any questions for me, you can certainly reach me at 8simplesteps.net, and go ahead and also DM me on LinkedIn. And I'll see you next week. Yvonne, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.